Israeli blockade of Gaza. Last week I said that that was underway, that they had left Cyprus and 2 boats with about 45 people in them, in the boats, and they were on their way. Well, the next day, last Saturday, they made it. The Israelis threatened to stop them, and they even reserved the right to use force if they chose to. But thankfully, they did not do that, and they did land. It was largely, not completely, a symbolic gesture, but I think it meant an awful lot to the Palestinians who were so grateful to see someone actually get through, and to see that the world hadn't completely forgotten about them, and that there were people who were willing to risk their lives in order to break the blockade and get some medical and other supplies to them. They would like to do that again. They're in debt right now to the tune of, I think, $100,000 or $200,000, but they'd like to raise money and do this again. I don't know if they would be able to get through as easily next time. I'm sure Israel wouldn't like to see this become a habit, but it's just good to see that they did it. And it's good to see that rather small action and symbolic gesture that it was. I think it accomplished a lot, and it shows that you can accomplish something, you know, even no matter how small it might be. So that's the good news. There's plenty of bad news. I'm not going to go into that. So that's about all I have to say. I don't have any announcements that I can think of. If anyone has anything, or if anyone would like to say something, now would be a good time.
Well, of course, we have been watching or listening to the coverage of the convention in Denver, and we can look forward to another week of very conventional activities in Minneapolis, St. Paul this coming week. The thing that, of course, this reinforces as we listen to the positions of the Democratic candidates continually move further and further to the right. The calls for an escalation of U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and that call being punctuated this week by the UN report that it was indeed 90 Afghan civilians that had been killed by a U.S. airstrike, 60 of those Afghan civilians being children. This is not building a democracy in Afghanistan. This is not nation building in Afghanistan. This is one atrocity after another, which we have seen unfold in these 2 criminal wars and occupations set in motion by the Bush administration, but sadly, very tragically, also enabled by the Democratic Congress, continually enabled again and again by the Democratic Congress. I want to mention one very important campaign, one very important way that we can locally become a part of the building movement that is going to be necessary to get the United States out of Iraq and Afghanistan, and that is the campaign to keep Oregon's National Guard in Oregon. The plans are to deploy Oregon National Guard troops in Afghanistan or Iraq next summer. And there is a building campaign with dozens of organizations, including the Rural Organizing Project, of course, Peace and Justice Works, Portland Peaceful Response Coalition, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and dozens of other organizations that have come together for this campaign. And we have these petitions. Hundreds and hundreds of people have already signed, but we need to collect thousands and thousands of signatures for this to be a successful campaign, and it can be a successful campaign if only we will put our shoulder to the wheel and make sure that the people who we know, the tens of thousands in this state who would sign this petition, were they to see it, were it to be put into their hands. So I'm calling on folks today. We're going to hang out here on the plaza, and I've got a couple of clipboards here, and we're going to collect signatures today. It's a lovely evening to be out. beautiful sky. We're feeling the beginnings of fall as we head into this final stretch of the campaign season. But we know that no matter who is elected in November, that our work will continue. Our work has to continue, because we need to build a genuine social movement that can begin to turn the direction of this nation. It's not going to come out of the Democratic Party, which we saw sponsored by the likes of AT&T and the rest, and Pepsi and the rest of the corporations that financed that giant convention, and it certainly won't be changed the direction except in the most frightening ways by a McCain administration and the Republicans. And we're going to see the same, very likely the same sponsors at their convention in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So I thank everybody for being out here tonight. It's a lovely evening to collect signatures to make sure the Oregon National Guard stays here in Oregon. Thank you very much. I don't think we have this online yet, but that's okay. Okay, then.
Hey Joe, are you going to the RMC?
Not like you are, Richard. I'm sorry. When do you leave?
Saturday afternoon.
And you're gone for how long? 1 week?
I'll be there from almost a week.
Good job, buddy. You're representing us.
Yeah.
Thanks.
New books at the library, and this one in particular talks about the bombing issue in the epilogue and how the U.S. is seen by its NATO allies as going overboard on bombing, that it uses vague aerial surveillance information to target with a bombing assault, and that this is why we continually see these reports of civilian casualties. And it's very interesting to read how the other NATO allies are very critical of what the U.S. is doing in this regard, and unfortunately the elements of the bombing campaign in Iraq or Afghanistan are usually buried in the back pages of the Oregonian. So I think this is an issue we'll need to learn more about in the future, because it seems like that's where the focus is going.
The convention over the last week, and of course one of the things I found discouraging was that they selected for Vice President Joe Biden. Discouraging for us because Joe Biden is one of the guys who voted for the war, who had kind of a sham hearing so that the people who could certify that there were no weapons of mass destruction, namely Scott Ritter, couldn't testify. So he's a guy that can facilitated, one of the Democrats who facilitated the war. And in his speech, he talked about, you know, we were justified in going to Afghanistan somehow, but when we went into Afghanistan, we killed 20,000 innocent people. I don't know how you can justify that. The Democrats just seem to skip over these 20,000 people that we killed over there, as if it didn't happen. Also, I think Biden mentioned something that we're spending $10 billion a week. That sounds like a lot. He said we shouldn't be doing that when Iraq has profits on their oil of $79 billion. You know, Iraq didn't invite us to be over there. They didn't invite us to destroy their country. We owe them money, and if they have money left over, so be it. The United States has a responsibility to rebuild Afghanistan and pay reparations.
Iraq.
Huh? Iraq, sorry. Both places, but I'm mainly talking about Iraq. Thank you. The other thing that kind of troubles me is that how long is it going to be before it's recognized that Vietnam was not a mistake? You can't be a hero in that war because the war was a crime. They did tone it down a little bit. They just mentioned that Mr. McCain had served valiantly, heroically. They didn't call him a war hero. But you can't be a war hero by bombing civilian infrastructure, killing women and children. And that's what he did.